The text arrived at 2:17 a.m. A soft chime on a phone that received messages only from those who commanded covens, reported territorial breaches, and announced executions. But this one was different. It was from an unknown number, written in the clumsy autocorrect of small, frightened fingers. "He's beating my mama. Please help." Varric Dalton stared at the screen, his pale eyes narrowing. Wrong number, he thought at first. A mistake, a prank, perhaps even a trap set by rival covens testing his vulnerabilities. Then another message appeared, briefer, more desperate. "I'm hiding under my bed. He said he's going to kill her this time." Varric's hand tightened around the phone. He had witnessed fear across 5 centuries. He had caused fear, perfected it, weaponized it into an art form that kept his territories in line. But he had never witnessed this, a child's terror so raw it bled through a screen, begging a stranger because there was no one else left in her small, dying world. His fingers moved with preternatural speed, typing only 4 words. "I'm on my way." No calculation, no political consideration, no rational thought. His lieutenants fell silent as he rose from the obsidian table, grabbed his coat, and moved toward the door with preternatural speed. "Your Majesty, where are you going?" "The territorial accords." He didn't answer. He didn't need to because something in that child's words, that desperate plea typed with trembling fingers, struck a part of him he thought had died in 1547. His car tore through the empty streets, a black blur against the sleeping city. Another message lit up his screen. "There's blood everywhere. I can't wake Mama up. Please hurry." Varric's grip on the steering wheel tightened until the leather cracked beneath immortal strength. His jaw clenched. City lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. Every second felt like an eternity. By the time he reached the address, a rundown house in a neighborhood the city had forgotten, he already knew one terrible truth. Tonight, the Vampire King wasn't arriving as a ruler of shadows. He wasn't coming to enforce treaties or punish those who challenged his authority. He was arriving as the only hope a terrified child had left in a world that had abandoned her. And what he found inside that house awakened something he thought had died 500 years ago, something that would change not just one small life, but the very purpose of his immortal existence. Stay with me until the end, because what Varric discovered in that living room will make your heart stop and start again. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's continue. The speedometer climbed past 120. Varric's foot pressed harder against the accelerator, the engine roaring in protest. These streets had witnessed his presence for decades. Dark alleys where he'd hunted, intersections where he'd made examples of those who challenged his rule, corners where humans had learned to quicken their steps when shadows grew too deep. He had been the thing parents warned their children about, the reason people locked their doors and checked over their shoulders. Never once had he raced through them to save someone. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. Centuries of making mortals fear the night, and now he was fighting against time itself, that cruel, indifferent force that governed their fragile lives. Every red light he blew through felt like a personal insult. Every empty stretch of road mocked his supernatural speed, because no matter how fast he moved, a child was fading in real time, and physics still applied to rubber and asphalt. His phone vibrated again. Varric's eyes flickered to the screen, and his undead heart would have stopped if it still beat. "I think Mama stopped moving. I'm really tired. Is it okay if I sleep?"
"No."
The word escaped his throat like a growl. His hands crushed the steering wheel, the metal frame groaning beneath his grip. That drowsiness, that terrible, innocent question, he knew what it meant.
"Shock."
Blood loss. The body's final mercy before it surrendered. He typed with one hand, his thumb moving frantically across the screen while the other kept the car from careening off the road.
"No."
"Stay awake.
"Talk to me."
What's your name?" The response took agonizing seconds. "Sophia."
"I'm Varric."
"I need you to stay awake, Sophia."
Can you do that for me?
He waited. 5 seconds.
10.
15. The silence was suffocating. Varric realized with horrifying clarity that he was experiencing something he hadn't felt since his mortal death in 1547, true helplessness. He commanded territories. He bent ancient creatures to his will. He could shatter bones with a thought and move faster than human eyes could track. But none of it mattered if he arrived 30 seconds too late. The GPS announced 2 minutes to destination. 2 minutes that stretched like centuries. 2 minutes where a 7-year-old girl might close her eyes and never open them again. No police sirens. No help coming. Only him. And he might already be too late. 5 centuries dissolved like morning mist. The desperate text, the modern city, the racing car. All of it faded as memory seized him with the force of a physical blow. England, 1547. When he had been Varric Thorn, second son of a minor nobleman whose estate bordered the dark forests of Surrey. When he had been human. When he had been powerless. Their manner had been modest, but filled with warmth, his mother Lady Catherine's laughter echoing through stone corridors, the smell of bread baking in the kitchens, and always, the sound of Alara's endless questions. His sister had been 10 years old, all wild curls and bright eyes that saw wonder in everything. She'd follow him through the fields, demanding to know why the sky changed colors, whether dragons had truly existed, if she could learn to fence like the boys did. When I'm grown, I'll travel the whole world, she'd announced one autumn afternoon, spinning in the fallen leaves. And you'll come with me, won't you, Varric? We'll have such adventures. He'd laughed and promised they would. He'd had no idea how little time they had left. Lord Brennan had arrived that winter, a powerful nobleman seeking their mother's hand after their father's death. Wealthy, influential, charming in public. But Varric had seen the coldness in his eyes, the way his smile never reached them. When Lady Catherine refused his proposal, choosing independence over alliance, Brennan's mask had shattered. The confrontation happened in their great hall after supper. Brennan's voice had risen, his words cutting and cruel. When their mother stood firm, he'd advanced on her with rage twisting his features. 17-year-old Varric had stepped between them, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. Leave our home.
Now.
Brennan's men had moved with practiced efficiency. Varric remembered the first blow to his stomach, the second to his head. He'd fought back with everything he had, youth and desperation against trained brutality, but it hadn't been enough. Through dimming vision, he'd seen Brennan's hands close around Alara's throat as she tried to reach their mother. Heard her cry out his name. Then darkness claimed him. When he'd woken, the manor was silent except for his mother's sobbing. Brennan and his men had vanished into the night. Varric had crawled across the cold floor to where Alara lay in their mother's arms, so small and still. Her eyes had fluttered open when he took her hand. Varric, her voice was barely a whisper.
I'm frightened.
I'm here, he choked out, tears streaming down his face. I'm right here, little one. But being there hadn't been enough. It had never been enough. He'd carried her to her bed, his mother following in a daze of grief. Alara's breathing had grown shallow, each breath a struggle. Varric had knelt beside her, holding her small hand in both of his, willing his strength into her failing body. But mortality didn't care about will. Varric. Her voice was fading, each word an effort. Promise me something. Anything. The tears wouldn't stop. Anything, Alara. Promise me. She coughed weakly. You'll protect those who can't protect themselves. Promise me you won't let this happen to other children. Her eyes, once so bright with questions and dreams, looked up at him with desperate hope. Make it mean something. Please. I promise. He'd pressed his forehead to her hand, his whole body shaking. I swear it, little one. I'll protect them. All of them. She'd smiled then, so faint he almost missed it. Thank you for keeping your promises. The hand in his went still. The days that followed existed in a haze of rage and grief. His mother had withdrawn into silence. The authorities had done nothing. Lord Brennan was too powerful, too connected. Justice, Varric learned, was a luxury the powerless couldn't afford. So he'd taken his father's sword and ridden into the night, tracking Brennan to the dark forests where the nobleman thought himself safe. He'd been 17 and untrained. Brennan's guards had been soldiers. The outcome had been inevitable. They'd left him bleeding in the snow beneath ancient trees, his life seeping into the frozen earth. As consciousness faded, Varric had welcomed death. At least in death, he wouldn't have to face his failure anymore. But death had other plans. The woman who found him had moved like silk through shadows, impossibly beautiful and utterly terrifying. Seraphine. She'd studied him with ancient eyes that had witnessed empires rise and fall. "You're dying, boy," she'd said, her voice like velvet over steel. "But I sense something in you, a promise burning brighter than your fading life." She'd tilted her head. "I can give you what you need.
Power. Time.
Strength to keep your word." Her smile had been sharp as broken glass. "But the cost is everything you are. You'll become something else. Something eternal. Something feared. Will I be strong enough to protect them?" His voice had been barely audible. "The ones who can't protect themselves? You'll be strong enough to reshape the world." He'd accepted without hesitation. The transformation had been agony beyond description, but when he'd risen 3 nights later, Varric Thorn was gone. In his place stood something that could hunt Lord Brennan to the ends of the earth. And he had. Brennan's screams had echoed through those same dark woods before silence claimed him forever. But revenge hadn't brought peace. And the centuries that followed had taught him a bitter truth. Humans were endlessly capable of cruelty. He'd tried to protect the innocent, to honor Alara's dying wish. But for every monster he destroyed, 10 more emerged. The promise had become a weight that crushed him, a reminder of his perpetual failure. So he buried it. Buried the pain, buried the memory, buried Varric Thorn himself. He'd become Varric Dalton, ruthless, cold, ruling through fear because fear was the only language the world understood. The promise to Alara had become a ghost he refused to acknowledge, a shame too deep to face. Until tonight. Until a child's desperate text had ripped open 500 years of carefully constructed numbness, and suddenly he was that 17-year-old boy again, kneeling beside someone small and broken, racing against time he didn't have. History was repeating itself. But this time, he had the power to change it. The memory shattered like glass. Varric was back in the present, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, the city streaking past in blurs of neon and shadow. The GPS had counted down. 50 seconds remained. Less than a minute between this moment and whatever waited in that house. His phone lit up on the passenger seat. Another message from Sophia. "I'm really scared. It's so quiet now. Are you still coming? Please don't forget about us." Varric's vision blurred red at the edges. Every instinct in his immortal body screamed at him to move faster, to transcend the limitations of metal and rubber and physics itself. If he could just abandon the car and run with his true speed, but no, he needed the vehicle. Medical supplies were in the trunk. He couldn't arrive empty-handed, not if Christy was. He couldn't finish that thought. The parallel was too perfect, too cruel. Alara's voice echoed across 500 years. "I'm frightened." And now Sophia's. "I'm really scared." Different words, same terror. The same small voice reaching out in the darkness, trusting that someone would come. That promises meant something. The message destroyed him. That desperate plea, "Don't forget about us," as if a frightened child needed to remind someone to care. As if she'd learned that adults broke their promises, that help never came, that being forgotten was just another certainty in a world designed to abandon the vulnerable. "I'm coming, Sophia." He spoke to the empty car, to the night, to the ghost of a 10-year-old girl he'd failed centuries ago. "I swear on everything I am, I'm coming." 30 seconds. The house materialized ahead, dark, silent, waiting. Varick's car screeched to a halt in front of the address, tires leaving black marks on cracked pavement. The neighborhood was exactly what he'd expected, forgotten by the city, abandoned by hope. Houses with peeling paint and boarded windows line the street like rotting teeth. No manicured lawns here, no concerned neighbors peering through curtains. This was the kind of place where people learn not to hear screams, not to ask questions, not to get involved. No police sirens wailed in the distance.
No flashing lights approached.
The world had turned its back on this street long ago, and everyone here knew it. He stepped out of the car, his supernatural senses immediately assaulting him with information. Through the walls, he heard it. A man's voice, slurred and vicious, spitting words too hateful to be coherent. Underneath that, fainter, a woman's weak sobbing. And beneath it all, almost imperceptible even to his enhanced hearing, the rapid, terrified breathing of a child trying desperately to stay silent. His phone vibrated one final time. "He's coming upstairs. He knows where I am." Something ancient and primal awakened in Varick's chest. Not the calculating predator who ruled the supernatural world. Not the political strategist who brokered treaties between covens. This was something older, something human. The protective rage of someone who had failed once and would burn the world before failing again. He didn't waste time with the front door. Shadows responded to his will, bending and stretching as he moved through them like water, materializing inside the house as if he'd always been there. A nightmare made flesh, stepping from darkness into dim light. The smell hit him immediately. Cheap whiskey and stale cigarette smoke, the acrid tang of unwashed desperation. And underneath it all, the copper scent of blood, fresh, too much of it. His eyes adjusted instantly to the gloom, taking in the scene with predatory precision. The living room was a war zone of poverty and violence. Overturned furniture, shattered glass catching what little light filtered through grimy windows. And there, at the base of the stairs, lay Christy Evans. She was crumpled like a discarded doll, one arm twisted at an unnatural angle, her face swollen and discolored. Her breathing was shallow, labored, unconscious, but alive.
Barely.
Varick's enhanced hearing picked up her heartbeat, weak, irregular, struggling. He moved to her side with inhuman speed, his fingers finding her pulse. Too slow. She'd lost significant blood from a gash above her temple. Internal injuries, likely. She needed a hospital, needed it now, but calling emergency services meant questions, investigations, human authorities poking into supernatural business. He'd handle it his way. Heavy footsteps thundered on the floor above. The man, Lucas Morgan, Varick's mind supplied, because he'd already memorized every detail Sophia's texts had provided, was heading toward wherever the child was hiding. "Where are you little brat?" Lucas's voice was thick with alcohol and rage. "Think you can call someone? Think anyone's coming to help? No one cares about you. No one's coming." Varick's eyes flashed crimson in the darkness. His lips pulled back from elongating fangs. "Wrong," he whispered to the empty air. Then he moved toward the stairs, a shadow ascending to meet a monster. But only one of them would be walking back down. And it wouldn't be the human. Varick reached the top of the stairs just as Lucas Morgan emerged from the hallway. The man was exactly what 5 centuries of experience had taught Varick to recognize instantly, a coward who mistook cruelty for strength, who needed victims smaller and weaker to feel powerful. He was mid-30s, unshaven, wearing a stained undershirt that reeked of sweat and cheap beer. In his right hand, he clutched the jagged neck of a broken bottle, still dripping amber liquid onto the threadbare carpet. Lucas squinted at the figure standing in the shadows of the landing, his alcohol-fogged brain struggling to process the impossibility of another person in his house. "Who the hell are you?" His words slurred together, aggressive and loud. This is private property. Get out before I... He didn't get to finish the threat. Varric moved. To human eyes, it would have appeared as if he'd simply teleported. One moment he stood 5 feet away. The next, his hand was wrapped around Lucas's wrist with the grip of a steel vice. The broken bottle fell from nerveless fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud but not shattering. Varric's other hand had caught it mid-fall and set it aside with deliberate care. Quiet. Controlled. What the... Lucas tried to jerk away, tried to pull back, but he might as well have been pulling against a mountain. Panic flickered across his face, the first real emotion besides rage that had probably crossed his features in hours. Varric applied pressure. Not much. Just enough. The wrist bones cracked with a sound like green wood snapping. Lucas's scream built in his throat, but before it could escape, Varric's free hand was there, covering his mouth, silencing him with effortless strength. Then, with the casual ease of someone moving a piece of furniture, Varric lifted Lucas off his feet and slammed him against the hallway wall hard enough to knock the air from his lungs, but not hard enough to break through the drywall. He held him there, suspended, Lucas's feet dangling inches above the floor. "Look at me," Varric commanded, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of centuries. Lucas's eyes, wide with terror and confusion, met Varric's. And in that moment, he saw what he was truly facing. Varric let the mask slip, let the predator show. His eyes ignited with crimson light that seemed to burn from within, ancient and utterly inhuman. His lips pulled back from teeth that had elongated into fangs, not the decorative Halloween kind, but genuine instruments of death that had ended lives before Lucas's great-great-grandparents had been born. Lucas made a strangled sound behind Varric's palm. The smell of urine filled the air as his body's most primal systems recognized what his conscious mind couldn't quite process. He was prey. He had always been prey. And he'd just discovered that humans weren't the apex predators they believed themselves to be. "Hello." A small voice drifted from one of the bedrooms down the hall, thin and frightened and heartbreakingly young. "Is someone there? Did you come to help my mama?" "Sophia." The sound of her voice hit Varric like a physical force. Every muscle in his body went rigid. The crimson glow in his eyes flickered, then dimmed. For a moment, he stood frozen, suspended between the monster he'd become and the man he'd once been. The 17-year-old boy who'd knelt beside his dying sister and promised to protect the innocent. Lucas, sensing hesitation, began to struggle again. Behind Varric's hand, he tried to speak, the words coming out as desperate, muffled pleas. "Please don't. I'm sorry, please." Varric's gaze shifted back to the man in his grasp. Lucas was crying now, tears streaming down his face. All his drunken bravado evaporated in the face of something his primitive hindbrain recognized as death incarnate. He was whimpering, begging, promising anything and everything if Varric would just let him go. For a moment, just a moment, Varric considered it. Considered ending this quickly, permanently, the way he'd ended so many others over the centuries. It would be easy, justified. This man had beaten a woman unconscious in front of her child, had terrorized them for months if the fear in Sophia's texts was any indication. The world wouldn't mourn Lucas Morgan's passing.
But that small voice had changed something.
Sophia was hiding somewhere behind one of these doors, terrified and traumatized, her childhood already scarred by violence she'd witnessed. She didn't need to see more. Didn't need to watch someone else get hurt, even someone who deserved it. Didn't need another nightmare added to the collection she'd carry for the rest of her life. Some things a child should never witness. Not even justice. Varric leaned close, his breath cold against Lucas's ear. "We're going outside. You're going to walk quietly. You're going to do exactly as I say. Because if you make me do this in front of that child, what I do to you will be so much worse. Do you understand?" Lucas nodded frantically, desperately. "Good." Varric released his mouth, but maintained his grip on the man's broken wrist. "Move." He dragged Lucas toward the stairs, away from Sophia's voice, away from innocent eyes. The judgment would come. The reckoning would be delivered. But it would happen in the darkness where it belonged, where monsters settled accounts with monsters, and children could remain children just a little while longer. The night air was cold and sharp when Varric hauled Lucas through the back door into the overgrown yard. No streetlights reached here. No windows overlooked this forgotten patch of dead grass and rusted chain-link fence. Just darkness and silence, and the pale eye of the moon bearing witness. Varric released Lucas, who immediately stumbled backward, cradling his ruined wrist against his chest. The man's face was pale, slick with sweat despite the chill. His eyes darted around, looking for escape routes, for weapons, for anything that might save him from whatever nightmare he'd stumbled into. "Sit," Varric commanded, pointing to the crumbling concrete steps. Lucas sat. He had no choice. Every survival instinct in his body was screaming that running would be fatal. Varric remained standing, a pillar of shadow against the moonlight, his eyes still holding that faint crimson glow. When he spoke, his voice was eerily calm. "You have 60 seconds to justify your existence. Explain to me why I shouldn't kill you right now." Lucas's voice cracked. He swallowed hard, tried again. "I didn't mean to. I was stressed, you know? Work's been hell. The bills keep piling up, and she just keeps pushing my buttons." 45 seconds. Wait. I've been drinking too much, I know that. I need help. I'll get help. I'll go to AA, therapy, whatever. I'm not a bad person. The alcohol makes me do things I don't mean to do. 30 seconds. Lucas was babbling now, words tumbling out in desperate succession. "She provokes me. Christy, she knows exactly what to say to set me off. And the kid, always crying, always needing something. I can't think. I can't breathe in that house. Any man would snap under that pressure. You don't understand what it's like." "Time's up." Lucas fell silent, his chest heaving. Varric moved closer, crouching down until they were eye level. Lucas flinched backward, but there was nowhere to go. "I've lived for 478 years, Varric said quietly. "I have walked this earth through plagues and wars, through the rise and fall of empires. I have seen thousands of men like you, Lucas Morgan. Thousands. In every century, in every country, in every language, they all say the same things you just said." He tilted his head, studying Lucas the way an entomologist might study an insect. "You tell yourselves you're tortured, misunderstood, driven to it by circumstances beyond your control. You blame the alcohol, the stress, the victims themselves. You cry and promise to change while the people you hurt are still bleeding." Lucas opened his mouth to respond, but Varric raised a single finger. The gesture, small as it was, carried such weight that Lucas's jaw snapped shut. "But I've lived long enough to know the truth," Varric continued. "You are not tortured. You are not misunderstood. You are not a good man corrupted by circumstances." His eyes blazed brighter. "You are simply evil by choice. You hurt people weaker than you because it makes you feel strong.
Because you can.
Because somewhere along the way, you decided that your anger mattered more than someone else's safety." "Please," Lucas whispered. "Please don't kill me. I'll do anything. I'll leave. I'll never come back. Just please. I know you'll leave." Varric's hand shot out, gripping Lucas by the jaw, forcing the man to meet his gaze. "Look at me. Look directly into my eyes." Lucas tried to resist, but his head turned as if pulled by invisible strings. His eyes locked onto Varric's burning crimson stare, and he felt something slide into his mind like ice water in his veins. Varric's voice dropped to barely more than a whisper, but every word carried the weight of absolute command. "You will leave this city tonight. You will take nothing but the clothes on your back and whatever money is in your wallet. You will never contact Christy Evans or Sophia Evans again. You will never call, never write, never attempt to see them. Their names will become poison in your mouth. The compulsion sank deeper, rewriting neural pathways, binding Lucas's will with supernatural chains that would hold stronger than any restraining order. You will never raise your hand to another living soul in anger, Varric continued, his voice resonating with ancient power. You will never hurt another woman, another child, another person weaker than yourself. This command is written into your very being now. You couldn't break it if you tried. Lucas's eyes were wide, glassy, tears streaming down his face as something fundamental inside him shifted and locked into place. Varric leaned closer. And if you ever attempt to break these commands, Lucas Morgan, I will know. No matter where you run, no matter how far you hide, I will find you, and I will show you that there are fates worse than death. His lips pulled back, fangs gleaming in the moonlight. Fates that last forever. Do you understand? Yes. The word came out as a sob. Then go.
Run.
And pray we never meet again. Varric released him. Lucas scrambled to his feet and ran, crashing through the overgrown yard, through the gate, into the night. Within seconds, he was gone, leaving only the sound of his panicked footsteps fading into the distance. Varric stood alone in the yard for a moment, letting the silence settle around him. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in months. It rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. This is Dr. Rothman.
Elise.
It's Varric. I need you at an address immediately. Woman, mid-30s, significant trauma, unconscious. Head injury, possible internal bleeding. No hospitals, no police, no records. There was a pause. How bad? Bad enough that I'm calling you at 3 a.m. Send me the address. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Make it 10. He ended the call and turned back toward the house. Christy needed medical attention. Sophia needed reassurance. And somewhere in the wreckage of this night, Varric needed to figure out how to explain to a terrified 7-year-old that the monster who'd come to save her was real, but not the kind she needed to fear. Varric climbed the stairs slowly, each footstep deliberate and audible. The last thing he wanted was to startle an already terrified child. At the top, he paused outside the second door, listening to the faint, hitching breaths of someone trying very hard not to cry. He knocked gently. Sophia? My name is Varric. You sent me some messages. Can I come in? Silence stretched. Then, barely a whisper. Is he gone?
Yes.
He won't ever come back. I promise. Is my mama okay? The question pierced him. She's hurt, but breathing. A doctor is helping her right now. But I need to see that you're okay too. May I come in? He pushed the door open carefully. The room was small. Cartoon posters on the walls, a pink bedspread with stars, a bookshelf of worn paperbacks. In the darkness, it felt less like a child's sanctuary and more like a failed hiding place. I'm under here, came the trembling voice. Varric's enhanced vision found her immediately. Sophia was pressed into the far corner beneath the bed, knees drawn to chest, one hand clutching her phone, the other holding a stuffed rabbit. She was small for 7, all tangled blonde hair and enormous eyes that had witnessed far too much. Her pink unicorn pajamas were smudged with dust. He lowered himself to his knees beside the bed, then sat back on his heels, making himself as unthreatening as possible. Sophia, I'm going to stay right here. I won't come closer unless you say it's okay. She stared at him, searching his face. Are you Varric? The one from my phone. Yes. You came. You really came. Tears filled her eyes. I thought maybe you wouldn't. I thought maybe I texted the wrong number and no one would care, and I came as fast as I could, he said gently. I got every message you sent.
Why?
The word came out broken. You don't even know me. Nobody else helped. Why would you come? For a moment, Varric couldn't speak. The question carried the weight of 5 centuries. When his voice finally emerged, it cracked, The first time in 500 years that his carefully maintained composure had fractured. Because a long time ago, I made a promise to someone very important to me. Someone I loved more than anything in this world.
Who?
My little sister. Her name was Alara. He hadn't spoken her name aloud in decades. She was 10 years old. She made me promise before she died that I would protect children who were scared, that I wouldn't let bad things happen to them if I could stop it. I've been trying to keep that promise ever since. Sophia crawled forward slightly, moonlight catching her tear-streaked face. Did you keep it? The question was a knife. Not always, he admitted, voice rough. Sometimes I was too late. Sometimes I wasn't strong enough. Sometimes I forgot why I made the promise at all. He met her eyes. But tonight I kept it. Tonight I was fast enough. She studied him with that unnervingly direct gaze only children possess, seeing past pretense to truth. Then she whispered, "Thank you for keeping your promise." Something inside Verek's chest shifted.
Cracked.
Broke open. For 5 centuries, he believed that part of him was dead. The part that felt hope, that believed in redemption, that remembered humanity. But hearing those words from this child who trusted him despite every reason not to trust anyone, he felt it flicker back to life. A tiny flame in centuries of darkness. Small, fragile, but undeniably there. Before he could respond, footsteps sounded below. Verek, Dr. Rothman called. She's stable. Sleeping naturally now. He looked back at Sophia. That's the doctor. Your mama is going to be okay. Will you be all right here while I make some arrangements? She nodded, clutching the rabbit. Will you come back?
Yes.
I promise. Okay. She settled onto the bed's edge. I believe you. Those 3 words followed him down the stairs like absolution. Over the next hour, Verek worked with surgical efficiency. He called contacts, transferred funds through encrypted networks, set mechanisms in motion that would reshape 2 lives. An anonymous trust fund established in Sophia's name, enough for college, for opportunities, for dreams. A house purchased through shell companies in a safe neighborhood with good schools. Security personnel assigned to watch from the shadows, ensuring Lucas Morgan never returned and that no similar threat would emerge. Dr. Monica Chen, the best trauma therapist in the city, retained for weekly sessions. Everything arranged, untraceable, irreversible. By dawn, Christy was stable under Dr. Rothman's care, and Sophia had finally fallen asleep, exhausted. Verek stood in the doorway of her room one last time before leaving, watching the steady rise and fall of her breathing. She looked peaceful now. Safe. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to Marcus. The Northern delegation can wait. I have other priorities now. Then he walked out into the sunrise, something he rarely witnessed anymore, and felt the warmth on his pale skin. It didn't burn. That was myth. But it reminded him of mornings 5 centuries ago when he'd been human. When he'd been Verek Thorn, before the monster, before the darkness. Maybe he could be both now. Monster and protector. Darkness and light. Maybe that wrong number had been exactly right. 6 months later, Verek's car pulled up outside a small house with fresh white paint and a tidy garden. Autumn had painted the neighborhood in gold and amber. Before he could knock, the door flew open. Uncle Verek. Sophia grinned, healthy and bright, wearing jeans and a Science Museum t-shirt. You're early. Couldn't stay away, he said, holding up a bag. Found something you might like. Books. She bounced excitedly. History books. Ancient Rome, like you ask. She grabbed his hand without hesitation. That casual trust still caught him off guard, and pulled him inside. The house smelled like garlic and herbs. Family photos lined the walls. Sophia at school, Christy in the garden, both of them at the museum. A life rebuilt, one memory at a time. Christy emerged from the kitchen, smiling genuinely now. The bruises were gone, replaced by the quiet confidence of someone who'd reclaimed her life through therapy and time. Varric. Spoiling her again.
Someone has to, he replied.
Over dinner, Sophia chattered about chess club, her new friends, the field trip coming up. Normal childhood concerns. Wonderful concerns. Christy watched her daughter with gratitude, occasionally glancing at Varric with unasked questions she'd learned not to voice. Later, after Sophia went to bed, Christy walked him to the door. She adores you, you know. Talks about Uncle Varric constantly. Her voice thickened. I don't know who you really are or why you've done all this, but you saved us. Both of us. You're family now. I'm not going anywhere, Varric promised quietly. He found Sophia already in bed, the Rome book on her nightstand. Chapter 3, she asked hopefully. As he read about gladiators and emperors, she interrupted. Uncle Varric? Do you think your sister would have liked me? The question pierced 500 years of scar tissue. Yes, he said carefully. I think Alara would have loved you. You remind me of her. Sophia smiled, satisfied. I wish I could have met her. So do I. After she fell asleep, Varric drove to an overlook facing the city lights. He stepped out under the stars, the same stars that had witnessed his transformation, his centuries of cruelty, his long journey back to something resembling humanity. I kept my promise, Alara, he whispered to the night. After all these years, after all the times I failed, I finally kept it. Not just once, but every day now. His phone buzzed. A message from Sophia. A photo of her chess victory, captioned, I used your strategy. Varric smiled, a real smile, and typed back. Same time next week for your next lesson? Yes, came the immediate reply. He stood there suspended between his two worlds, the ancient vampire king who commanded supernatural armies and Uncle Varric who brought history books to a 7-year-old and taught her chess. 500 years ago, he would have thought these identities incompatible. But maybe that was the point. Maybe power was only worth having if it served something beyond itself. Maybe immortality only meant something if you used it to protect mortal lives that burned bright and brief. His network of vampires, werewolves, and supernatural beings now had new standing orders. Watch for the vulnerable. Intervene when humans preyed on the weak. Use immortal power not to terrify, but to shield. It was changing things.
Slowly.
Quietly. But it was changing things. The wrong number had been the right call. The call that saved Sophia and Christy. The call that saved Varric himself. And in saving them, the monster had finally found his way back to being human. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. More than enough. If this story pulled you in, don't forget to like this video, drop your favorite scene in the comments, and subscribe. Tomorrow's story is already waiting in the shadows. Thanks for watching.